The EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network presents Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis. Each week, Joan brings you news from inside the Vatican and the Church around the world, as well as interviews and answers to your questions. Now, here's the host of Vatican Insider, Joan Lewis.
Welcome to Vatican Insider. I hope you can bear with me for a few minutes as I'm experiencing a small case of laryngitis. Now, I hope you're able to stay cool as you join me this week on Vatican Insider on what is yet another scorching weekend in so many parts of the world. Sit back, relax, and enjoy a cool drink as I look at the news and then bring you my two special guests in the interview segment. As you know, this Sunday, July 28th, the Church marks the World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. Thus, I reprise a conversation I had with Catherine Wiley, grandmother and founder of Catholic Grandparents Association. Joining us is Marilyn Henry, who coordinates CGA in the United States. Now, this week is part 2. Both women are grandmothers, and both have exceptional lives and stories. This World Day is truly a great story of love and determination and teamwork. Enjoy. By the way, heartfelt congratulations to all grandparents, and congrats to the many elderly of the world who act as grandparents for the younger generation. But before that conversation, here are some news highlights. Another fairly quiet week as Pope Francis takes some time off for a working vacation, what we here call a staycation. Sunday, July 21st. Addressing the crowds in St. Peter's Square for the Sunday Angelus, Pope Francis reflected on the gospel of the day, which recounts the apostles telling Jesus all about what they accomplished in the mission he entrusted to them. The Lord then suggests they take some rest, but the crowds await them always, and the Lord expresses his compassion. The Pope explained how the Lord's invitation to rest and his compassion for the crowds are not mutually exclusive responses, but actually a combination of both that we need to have. The demands of the apostolate can be exhausting, said the Pope, and Jesus showed his concern for the disciples when he saw how tired they were. This is an ever-present risk for us today as well, especially when enthusiasm for our mission work, with all its tasks and responsibilities, can make us fall victim to overactivism, where our to-do list and results are the only things we see. We can become anxious and lose sight of what is essential, said the Pope, exhausting body and spirit, which in the end weighs down on the service offered to the Church and in our pastoral care. We must beware of the dictatorship of doing. Also Sunday, Pope Francis expressed his hope that the Paris Olympics and Paralympic Games provide an opportunity for warring nations to respect an ancient Greek tradition and establish a truce for the duration of the Games. According to ancient tradition, may the Olympics be an opportunity to establish a truce in wars, demonstrating a sincere will for peace. The Paris Olympic Games open Friday, July 26. I hope this event can be a sign of the inclusive world we want to build, and that the athletes, with their sporting testimony, may be messengers of peace and valuable models for the young. Also Sunday, Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin presided at a Mass at the Marian Shrine of Berchiv in Ukraine. Sent by Pope Francis to visit the country, he encouraged the faithful, quote, not to lose faith even if it seems that evil has the upper hand. Tuesday, July 23rd. In a telegram to President To Lam of Vietnam, Pope Francis expressed his condolences for the death of Nguyen Phu Trong, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam and the country's former president. He died last week at 80. The Pope expressed particular appreciation for the late president's role in fostering and promoting the positive development of the relations between Vietnam and the Holy See. Also Tuesday, the institutional meetings held in recent days by Cardinal Pietro Parolin with Ukrainian leaders culminated Tuesday morning in Kyiv with the meeting with the Secretary of State and President Vladimir Zelensky. Marilyn conveyed the Pope's solidarity and the Holy See's commitment to help find a just and everlasting peace. Also during his trip to Ukraine, Cardinal Marilyn visited the nation's largest pediatric hospital, hit on July 8th by a Russian missile strike. At the time of the attack, 627 children were in the hospital. The toll was 2 dead, including a doctor, and 50 injured, 8 of whom were minors. Additionally, 94 children were transferred to other medical facilities in Kyiv. The missile damaged the surgical, oncology, and intensive care units, as well as Ukraine's only laboratory for blood and cancer diseases. The toxicology building and the hospital's trauma unit were gutted. Wednesday, July 24th, the prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith sent a letter approved by the Pope to Cardinal Oscar Cantoni of Como, granting the nulla osta regarding spiritual experiences at the sanctuary of Macchio, known as Most Holy Trinity Mercy. In 2000, Gioacchino Genovese, a music teacher and choir director, married and the father of 2 daughters, began to perceive through, quote, intellectual visions, a living presence of the mystery of the Holy Trinity. A serious, discreet person who never sought the limelight, 5 years later, he invited more people to be involved with adoration, supplications, and novenas. Thursday, July 25th, ahead of the opening ceremony of the 2024 Summer Olympic Games in Paris, Atletica Vaticana encouraged the athletes in fraternal friendship and reiterated Pope Francis's appeal for an Olympic truce. With the beauty and fairness of each person's sporting gesture, and without resorting to shortcuts, Atletica Vaticana affirmed that the Games can be opportunities for hope. However, lamenting that the Olympics this year take place amid wars, tensions, and injustice on a global scale, the association reiterated Pope Francis's appeal for an Olympic truce. The popular and understandable language of sports and its values all contribute to the same, said the Atletica Vaticana message. Those are the news highlights, but stay here for the interview segment and learn more about Sunday's World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly from the woman behind it.
He is honored as a saint, monk, and the only English-born doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Bede entered a monastery in England as a child and spent almost his entire life there teaching and writing. He was perhaps the most learned person of his era, authoring biblical commentaries in the famed ecclesiastical history of the English people. He died in 735 and was named a doctor in 1899.
To find out more about the Doctors of the Church, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
This is a Messy Family Minute with Mike and Alicia Hernan. Social media has enabled us to be more connected than ever with the people from our past, friends who we rarely see, and family who live far away. This can be a great blessing, but when used without guidance by our children, social media can actually deform a child's development.
An essential aspect of a child's development is their relationship to the world. This happens through interactions between a child and their peers and a child and adults. Because of social media, most teens are overwhelmingly more influenced by their peers than by the adults in their lives. This is a problem.
94% of parents underestimate the activity of their children on social media. Don't be that parent. Use filtering and monitoring apps to protect your child and stay engaged in their tech use. Or better yet, hold off on introducing your child to social media. You want to be the strongest influence in your child's life for as long as possible.
For our full podcast on this topic and for downloadable resources, visit us at messyfamilyminute.org.
Welcome back to Vatican Insider. Here's Joan Lewis.
This Sunday, July 28th, the Church marks the World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. And this weekend, in the interview segment of Vatican Insider, I reprised part 2 of a conversation I had with Catherine Wiley, grandmother and founder of Catholic Grandparents Association, CGA, and Marilyn Henry, who coordinates CGA in the United States. Both women are grandmothers, and both have exceptional lives and stories. As you will hear, Catherine was truly the catalyst for this now annual World Day. I wish many blessings on all grandparents. Welcome back to Vatican Insider and part 2 of my conversation with Catherine Wiley, founder about 20 years ago in the UK of the Catholic Grandparents Association, and Marilyn Henry from Houston, Texas, who coordinates CGA activities in the US. At the end of part 1, Catherine was telling us of her desire in the early years of the association to have Pope Benedict write a letter for grandparents, and how, from that request, grew her desire for a World Day of Grandparents. Today, we hear about another trip to the Vatican, among many other wonderful stories.
So I went to Vatican, and I knocked on the door, and I was met by a father called Father Lalonde. And to cut a very long story short, I gave him the poster for the pilgrimage. I showed him the 3 letters I'd written to the Pope. I explained I didn't know why I hadn't an answer. Maybe I was sending it to the wrong place. And I showed him the prayers that the grandchildren of Ireland were writing for their grandparents to honour them and to thank them, which was very holistic. It involved the school and the family and the church. I thought he thought I was mad. And then he gave me a cup of coffee from a vending machine. This doesn't sound very grand for the Vatican. And I said, look, I'm only here because I honestly believe that if the Pope sees the request to write the prayer for grandparents, he will. He will. And so I gave him the 3 articles, and I went away, and almost immediately I got a reply from the Cardinal saying what a wonderful, wonderful initiative this was, and how much devotion he had himself to St. Anne, and how he didn't know if the Pope would ever write the prayer, but he would certainly ensure that he saw the prayer. And I knew that if he ever saw it, he would write it. Wow. Then shortly thereafter, they held the very first meeting for grandparents in Rome, and they invited me as I think the Cardinal invited me because he was intrigued, and he probably
had studied what your organization, the pilgrimages, what they had done, and everything was so effective. It was so positive.
I think he saw that the idea he could see way beyond me. Yeah. He was a wise man. Could see way beyond what I had in my heart or my mind. He visioned it before I did, and he opened the gate. And so on that Sunday, on that morning before that big congress started, there was a big mass in St. Peter's with all the cardinals and everybody. And I went to look for Father Lalonde, and they said, "Oh, he's behind." And then I came out, and this wonderful young man came up to me who I said, "Where can I find Father Lalonde?" And he said, "You speak very good English." And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Would you do the reading?"
Oh, my word.
I nearly dropped dead, Joan. Never mind, oh, my word. I mean, I was terrified to stand up there, underneath the chair with the Holy Spirit above me, reading in St. Peter's. Look, I'm a simple, ordinary woman from a small village.
Well, maybe it was better you didn't know days earlier. You probably would have been too nervous to do it.
I would. Yeah. But I mean, that man, Father Mark Lalonde, turned out to be the communications secretary, and the man who asked me to do the reading was the secretary to the Cardinal. Okay. And his name is Monsignor Carlos Simon, and those men, the church, were so fervent in their help and support to us. It's all I can say. It was fantastic. So Pope Benedict wrote the prayer, which is unbelievably wonderful, and he said, make them teachers of wisdom and courage, that they can pass on the faith to future generations. And that was the prayer that started the Catholic Grandparents Association, because I would never, in fact, I was ready to run a mile. I was so afraid of what I was doing, and so lacking in knowledge, and feeling so completely unworthy and unfit. And that prayer, I thought, the Pope cannot write a prayer, and I can't have this in my hand and do nothing with it. It was like the golden key. It was just like, and it did.
Well, it had to inspire you and give you courage in the face of something growing, first slowly and then well beyond your dreams and growing in America. And we'll look at that too in a minute, Marilyn. But it had to give you courage and say, this is why I'm doing this.
and for the benefit of so many people, spiritually.
Yes. Well, if you read the prayer, Joan, and if you read, I mean, that message from Pope Benedict's prayer is really, it's so profound. It really is. It never exclude them, let them not be marginalized, love them, cherish them. And Pope Francis picked up that theme.
Yes.
Straight away. And so in 2012, at the Eucharistic Congress in Ireland, I was privileged to be a speaker. And I asked then for a World Day of Prayer, like we had a Youth Day. But I was making the wrong ask, Joan, and I didn't realise this for 4 full years. I was asking for the feast day, the Memorial Day, to be elevated to a feast day. And in fact, there's something in canonical law or something that prevents that from happening. So what I really wanted was just simply a World Day for grandparents. So I changed the narrative. And I think, I don't know how many letters, maybe 6, maybe 7. And we got the answer back fairly quickly through the Papal Nuncio in Ireland, but it was under wraps that the Pope loved the idea and that it was going to happen.
And didn't you two get a chance last year, the meeting I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, when you were in Rome for the meeting organized by the Dicastery for the Family, Laity and Life? And didn't you get a chance then to speak to the Pope? And directly to, but was it that meeting in which you spoke to Francis and said, by the way, Your Holiness?
Well, Joan, I've been very fortunate because I've met Pope Francis now 5 times. Great. And in fact, the very first time, or I think the second time, my grandson and myself spoke in St. Peter's. We had the first plenary, we had the first huge pilgrimage for grandparents, which again, the CGA inspired, I have to say.
Sure.
And the one thing I wanted to do was to thank Pope Benedict. And would you believe that Pope Benedict was sitting opposite me?
Wow.
So for some reason, I had his prayer in my, and I had an A4. So I held it up, and I held it up so that I knew that the cameras could see it, and I thanked him for writing the prayer. So when we were in Rome, I'd already met Pope Francis 3 or 4 times. And this particular time, Father, it was an evangelization conference. I'm not sure I should be telling you this, Joan, but I asked Father Fisichella if I could give a letter to the Pope. And I don't know whether he pretended he couldn't hear me or not. But I met our Holy Father. Marilyn and I sat up the night before. Marilyn was doing all the work. And we went that day and bought 2 beautiful pieces of notepaper. It cost us €12. Do you remember?
Yes.
And we wrote the letter. And then when we printed it off, it went off page. So it ended up by just being in an ordinary piece of paper in a tiny envelope. And when I got up to him, it was the last letter we ever gave him. I gave it to him into his hand. And so together with Cardinal Farrell from the Dicastery,
right,
and Gabriella and Father Alessandro and Vittoria and all that team, they really made it happen. And so we sort of knew. And I met Cardinal Farrell and I said to him so cheekily, Cardinal, can we see the promised land?
Oh, I love it.
He said, don't worry, Catherine, it'll all happen in time. And then on the 31st of January...
this very year.
Yes.
Nobody knew, Joan. He hadn't told anybody. He put his hand in his pocket, if you remember back. He pulled it out and he read it out.
So the Pope announced the institution of the World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly, and he chose a lovely date, the 4th Sunday in July, because why is that, Marilyn?
It is the day closest to the memorial of St. Joachim and St. Anne.
Of Jesus' grandparents.
Right,
exactly.
Exactly.
So what a wonderful thing. I know there are governments that have days for grandparents and so forth, but for the Church to have a World Day like this is really astonishing. So here we are. This is the weekend. We had the first Mass for World Day for grandparents and the elderly, and it had to have been kind of a difficult day for the Pope, only because, of course, he would have wanted to preside at this Mass, but I think they certainly did the right thing, allowing the Holy Father to convalesce. It was too close to surgery. So there were some beautiful moments. You expressed your excitement the minute you walked in the door of my home and the minute we started this talk about the excitement of the weekend. Just to work for so many years, to hope, to pray, to have people with both of you, in the UK, around the world, in the US, backing you up, praying for you. Let's hope the Pope does this. He did it, and here we are, and this is just the beginning. Obviously, it's now history. So, your emotions on this day, Marilyn.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you because from the moment that we heard that Catherine called me very early in the morning on January 31st, and it almost, I thought something had happened because it was 10 till 7 in the morning, my time, and just the excitement in her voice. I think we were both screaming and both crying.
Wow.
And we haven't stopped since, I don't think, because we have been preparing, along with other people that are involved with us too, preparing for the day, providing resources for parishes and dioceses and Zoom meetings and all kinds of things. And it's so, the word gratifying and blessed, those words aren't even enough to express how we feel, because if you can imagine all over the world, and it's not just parishes and dioceses and grandparents all over the world, but I feel like my grandmother and my mother and all the saints on this holy ground that we've been, all the saints all week that I've been talking to, and all the churches I've left our beautiful prayer with, and everybody is with us, and it's been magnificent, really, and it will grow and be more magnificent from here to eternity.
Oh, sure.
Long after we're gone, because we'll always be with them and they'll always be with us.
And this First World Day has to be a stimulus, as I said a few minutes ago, not just for both of you, but for anybody who's been following it, who looks at your site, who knows about it, all the different countries, that we're in. So it is an amazing historical day. And just to know, I think the message here is to know that you can have a dream and you can make it happen. I think I shared with you the other night at dinner that it was my dad who gave me my PhD. And people are surprised because, of course, they think they know what that means. And I said, no, PhD is passion, hard work, and dreams. And you had that passion, both of you, for that idea. And the P could also stand for prayers. But you had a dream, you worked hard, and your PhD became a reality this past weekend. So there's a lot of people to thank, but you're at the top of that list. And I think the only sad thing about the First World Day was probably that the Basilica or St. Peter's Square had, cooler weather been around. It would have been crowded with people had more people been able to travel. We know how restricted travel can be, and there would have been grandparents from all around the world had that been possible, but we live in a COVID time, so, just a kind of a closing remark from each one of you. Marilyn, what are you going to bring home in your head and your heart?
Oh my gosh, so many memories and so many stories that I can pass on to our ministries all over the U.S., of course, but all over the world too, and just that we have been elevated. Our role, our vocation as grandparents has been elevated in the church. That this will be celebrated every year from here to eternity. And I just have to tell real quickly, last weekend I had a family reunion in Pennsylvania with my 99-year-old aunt, the last of my mother's 5 sisters, and she was so excited. She told me that she talks to my mother in her dreams. And I talk to my grandmother and my mother in my dreams, and it connects us, and we can tell those stories, the stories of my mother and my grandmother, to our grandchildren, and we learn from them, and the circle is complete. The circle never ends.
Marilyn, it just occurred to me, our mothers and grandmothers probably know each other now.
Yes.
They probably met.
They're dancing in heaven.
Oh, exactly. And looking down on the two of you with great pride. So, just a closing remark or two.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Marilyn and to bless her with all my heart and all my soul, because she was part of the dream. And I prayed for God to send somebody to help me. Yeah. And he sent Marilyn.
Wow.
And she's a force of nature. I really feel, after 20 years of praying and dreaming, that I believe in the power of prayer don't ever, ever, ever not believe in the power of prayer.
Right.
And I believe the grandparents' prayers are particularly powerful. I believe that for this particular part of our journey, it's mission accomplished. And I think that the 3 words we started with, the seek, the safety, and the safeguard, is an alliance between the generations,
right?
As Pope Francis said. And the grandparents are the bearers and the sharers and the gatekeepers of our memories. And we need to talk to them. And we need to share the gaze back with them that they gave to us. We need to look after them.
That same loving, understanding, caring gaze.
That we need to look after them like they looked after us. He based the whole thing on the parable of the 5 loaves and fishes. Feeding the multitude, looking at the hunger in every single person for that love, that care, that trust, that devotion. Grandparents give to us.
Yeah.
And it comes full circle, because when it gets to our stage, we need them to look to us and to safeguard us. And I think that what our Holy Father and this World Day for Grandparents will do is, it will, as Marilyn said, elevate the CGA, but more than the CGA, much more than that. There is now, as far as I'm concerned, a ministry for grandparents in every parish in the world, as Pope Francis asked. And every parish, every year, will have to do something to honour, praise, thanks,
exactly,
and remind grandparents of their vocation, and remind children and grandchildren of their eternal vocation and love for their grandparents.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank the Lord for the two of you, for what you've done, the millions who have been and will be in the future inspired, certainly, especially after this weekend. But more than that, I just thank the Lord for putting you in my life and for inspiring me. And
you are a gift to us.
In many, many ways. So on those notes, this Mutual Admiration Society.
3 wise women.
Right.
Oh, 3 wise women.
The 3, it began here.
3 wise women, it began here.
It began here.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to let everyone ponder those words, and I will close with heartfelt thanks to Catherine Wiley and to Marilyn Henry. And God bless you both.
God
Safe
bless
travels.
you. May St. Joachim and St. Anne, grandparents of Jesus, bless and thank every single person we've touched, who's touched us, we've met, and will meet again.
For more information on these stories, or to check out Joan's blog and to ask her a question, go to EWTN.com. That's EWTN.com. Thanks for listening to Vatican Insider on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.